Good morning, everyone. I'm coming up to you with my March wrap up. I don't know how the month has gone by already. And I actually read a total of 11 books this month. I was only expecting to read 10 books, but later this month, I picked up an ebook, a novella from a series that I have read and loved, and I didn't realize that she had novellas that happened in between the books. So I read Destroy Me by Tahir Mafi, which is 1.5 in the Shadow Me series, so it's one of the first novellas. So I read that, besides reading the other 10 books I had. So I read a total of 11 books, and I read 11 great books this month. And the way I'm gonna do this wrap up is, I'm breaking it down, so I'm doing it like by threes. So the first 3 books I'm going to talk to you about are the first 3 books I read this month. Ta-da! Two towers, stay in your lane. So the first book I read in the month of March was my classic for the month, and that happened to be The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've been meaning to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy for a while now. I had read the Fellowship of the Ring 2 years ago, and I loved it then. And so this year I wanted to read a certain amount of classics, and so let me start off with the Lord of the Rings and the World of Middle-earth. So I started off with The Hobbit, and then I read The Fellowship in February. And so this month I was going to read The Two Towers, which is very exciting. I love the book. Again, the similarities of the book to the movie, yes, they changed stuff in the movie from the book, but in any other way, I enjoyed it. I gave The Two Towers 5 stars, because I felt really in love with the story and the world of Middle-earth, which shows the nerdom I am in, but I enjoyed reading The Two Towers and reading the battles and how it's hard to use Goodreads with Lord of the Rings books because each book I own continues off where the last book takes place, so it's hard to use Goodreads. But the story is very good, and I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to read The Return of the King in April, and then I'll be done for now for Tolkien. It's a sad but exciting at the same time that I've read the big major work of Tolkien. I might read some of his other books that he wrote or his family wrote, so we'll see how that goes, but I'll probably love it. So the second book I picked up in the month of March was the Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's definitely a different type of Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. I enjoyed it, and it's definitely hard to put down, because I'm a huge fan of Beauty and the Beast, and hearing the story that they told in this book was exciting. And I'm talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. It was so interesting. I loved it. I could not put it down. Again, I'm kind of on a Sarah J. Maas kick at the moment, because I'm currently in the middle of the Throne of Glass series. There's another Sarah J. Maas book in this wrap up. So I really enjoyed A Court of Thorns and Roses. I really fell in love with Freya, and everything, and Tamlin, and everything. It was really interesting, and I couldn't put it down, and how the story was. it's one which is why I give it 5 stars. And this has been on my TBR for a while. The whole series has been on my TBR for a while. And so I'm finally picking it up, and I enjoyed the first book. I plan to read the second book in April. So I'm excited to continue on with this world. And the next book I finished in March is a second book in a series. I read the first book last month. It was like the last book on my TBR, and I read it so I could read the new book that came out in the beginning of the March, and I did, and I loved it. The ending, the drama, everything that happened. Again, I will not spoil it. The story is good. I cannot put the book down. That's how good it was. And for just finding the series this year, it made me like, I don't want to wait for the next one, because I know the next one will come out sometime next year, but just, no. And the book I happen to be talking about is The Wicked King by Holly Black. I read The Curl Pins in February, and I fell in love with the story and how much of a badass Jude was. Jude's still a badass in this book. Carden's still Carden. But I loved The Wicked King, which is why I gave it 5 stars. I'm excited to see what happens in the next book. Definitely with how this book ended, I kind of wanted, like, we get at least a snippet of the next book now? Which is not happening, but, I enjoyed The Wicked King, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next book. So, the next book I'm going to talk about in my reading wrap-up is, which I read after The Wicked King, was The Case for Jamie by Brittany Cavallero. This is book 3 of the Sherlock Holmes series, and I was very excited, definitely with how The Last of August kind of took place and what happened in that story. I was very excited to see what's going to happen for The Case for Jamie, and this book did not let me down. It was exciting to see what the characters were doing and what was happening, and again, this book let us see what was going on in the mind of Sherlock Holmes, which the other two books didn't really see as much. So I was very excited to see Charlotte's point of view, because we're so used to seeing it in Jamie's point of view. So I'm so excited that I was able to finally read this before the last book came out, which I also read this month. I actually finished it today. So I gave The Case for Jamie 5 stars, and it was very exciting to read. After I read The Case for Jamie, I picked up the first book in the Grishaverse. I picked up Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I read The Six of Crows in February for Books with Friends, and I was able to fully understand the series beforehand, because I didn't read the Grishaverse. I didn't read the first trilogy, and so I was confused, which I'm like, I don't want to be confused. And so I promised myself that before I read Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in the Six of Crows series, I would pick up the Grishaverse. And I picked it up. I picked up Shadow and Bone, and I absolutely loved it. I flew through this book so fast. I read it in a couple of days, and in all honesty, I loved it. It makes sense with all the magic and the magic system now that I now understand from reading this book. Now I understand Six of Crows better. So I gave Shadow and Bone 5 stars, and I plan to pick up the second book, Season Storm, in April. because I definitely want to continue with this series. So I really enjoyed Shadow and Bone. After that, I picked up a novella series. I picked up the Bane Chronicles, which was written by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Reese Brennan, and Maureen Johnson. I fell in love with the Shadowhunter world this past year, and I read all 6 Mortal Instruments series books. I read all TDI, and I read all TDA. And I'm like, let me pick up the novellas so I can know more about this world that I already know. And so I picked up the Bane Chronicles, and I now know so much more about Magnus Bane that I didn't know beforehand, and I fell even more in love with Magnus. Which is why I gave the Bane Chronicles 5 stars. And that's also why I decided I'm going to pick up Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy next month. So that way I'll be ready for, well, more Shadowhunters. Let's see, what should I talk about next? So the next book I read was actually the Books with Friends book pick of the month, which happens to be The Gilded Wolves by Rashani Chofsky. So I picked up this book, and other people have already had started reading the books, and a lot of people were not liking it, and so my standards were not so. They were in the middle, because I was taking in what other people were talking about and what they were thinking of the book. And I just let me go in, let me start reading, and make my own thoughts. I ended up loving the story, and I loved the mystery and the magic system with everything that happened in this book. I loved it. The writing was phenomenal, and I enjoyed it, which is why I gave it 5 stars. I understand other people's point of view and what they thought of the book, because it's their prerogative. I loved reading the Books with Friends book of the month, which is Gilded Wolves. I picked up Triumphant by Leslie Livingston. This happens to be the last book in the Valiant series. It was a trilogy. I found the series last year. It takes place in ancient Rome and ancient Ireland and ancient Egypt. Altogether, I love the series. I'm sad it's over, but I plan to reread the series because I really enjoyed it and the history and the knowledge that we saw through this whole book. After reading Triumphant, I went to my biggest book of the month, Empire Storms by Sarah J. Maas. So this is book 5 in the Throne of Glass series, and trust me, I was nervous to read it, but I read it, and well, I enjoyed it so much. And with how the story ended, I'm kind of nervous about what's going to happen in Tower of Dawn. But I'm excited to pick up the 6th book because I'm getting close to the end. I'm not ready for it to end, but at the same time, I really enjoyed this series. And this book happens to be, I think, one of my favorites. So, the next book I read, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. Which happened to be Destroy Me by Tahir Mafi. This is the first novella out of a series. This is 1.5 in the Shadow Me series because she has put out a novella after each book. So this is the first novella. I read it, and it's all in Warner's point of view. I still don't trust Warner, but seeing this novella makes it understandable what happened in between the first book and the second book. I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to continue reading the novellas. So the next and the final book that I read in the month of March happens to be another Benny Cavallero series book, and it happens to be A Question for Holmes, which is the fourth and final book in the Sherlock Holmes series. I am so sad that the series is ending. I loved it. I loved what the story talked about, and I just, oh, I'm sad it ended, but it was a good ending. I loved the story. I loved the mystery. I'm gonna miss Sherlock Holmes and Nobody Comments so much. Again, I kept track with how many books I read, how many pages I read in the month of March. I read a grand total of 4,554 pages this month, which is very exciting. I read a lot of lesser paged books. I didn't have too many big giant books. I had about 3 giant books, which is The Two Towers, the Bane Chronicles, and I had The Empire of Storms, which was one. Those were the 3 biggest paged books I read this month. And I'm ready to hit April. My goal for April is to read 12 books. I will also be doing Camp NaNoWriMo, where I want to write 30,000 words of at least start a book, which I'm very excited for. But that is my March wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a happy reading time. Bye!